Screen sharing, and if you're
Here
ready
you
to
are.
get started, I will get talking. Uh, my name's Lauria Racca. I am the staff geologist at the licensing board. My official title is Senior Registrar for Geology and Geophysics at the California Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists. I think they give you those fancy titles to make you feel more important, but basically I'm tech support for everybody at the board. I often joke that I work for 50 different people. So Katrina asked me to come and talk a little bit about several different topics. My normal presentation that I give to university students is about the Geologist in Training certificate. And I also try and work in some career, how to start your career advice. However, it seems that for the purposes of tonight's discussion, the request was to include a little bit about myself. How did I get here? What my career arc has been. So what I plan on doing, if this works for everybody, and please tell me if you'd prefer me to do something different, is to start out with just a little overview of my career pathway and work into the typical part of the presentation where I give you some advice on how to start your own career. And then after that, take a short break for any questions that people might have, and then move on to an overview of the GIT. I did include the slide, send the slides to Katrina, so everybody can have a copy of that if they choose to. And if we don't get around to the GIT portion of the discussion, I've started doing monthly webinars on the board's website about the GIT for students, just because during COVID, it's been so hard to get out to the various schools. So this is a picture from a long time ago, showing that all of us were students at one point. I'm trying to think when exactly this was taken. This had to be late 70s or early 80s, maybe. But the point I want to make with this photo is that almost half of these people are people that I still run into every day on a regular basis. It's a small world, and the people that you are in school with now or that you may meet during your college career are people that you're going to see over and over and over again. So when I first started my geology journey in school, I had this fantasy that I was going to be a hard rock mining geologist. Of course, my backup plan was if that didn't work, I was going to work here at Yosemite. And I've actually been offered a job at Yosemite, and I turned it down because at the time in my career that it was offered to me, it just wasn't the right fit. Where I actually wound up was here, working in environmental cleanup. When I graduated from school, these are the jobs that were available. Mining and petroleum were in the dump. I think one person out of my entire geology class actually landed a job and had a career in mining. But most of us wound up working in either engineering geology or hydrogeology. The most fun project of my career was actually an engineering geology project. And it started out when I helped a friend. I was kind of between the time of exploring graduate school and getting my first job, and a friend of mine at school was doing his master's thesis. And he was working with a famous engineering geologist by the name of Jerry DeGraff, who specialized in landslides. And I went out with Muhammad, and Jerry and Muhammad and I and another person mapped 2 or 3 landslides. And, it seems like such an insignificant thing. But fast forward to the late 90s when Highway 50 between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe was closed for a month because of multiple very significant landslides. And the only person at the firm I was working for, other than the project manager, who had any experience mapping landslides was me. So I spent a month walking up and down closed Highway 50, mapping landslides. It was the most fun project of my entire career. After working in consulting for a while, I kind of gravitated toward the project management and management end. I have a tendency to be naturally organized, and I kind of fell into the role of what I call a fixer. If there was a project that was having problems, it wasn't moving along, give it to Laurie. So once I fixed that project, then it was like, oh, well, that one's running fine. So I didn't get the benefit of actually enjoying my work after that. I got to move on to the next screw up. And, you know, the problem, not problem, but the issue with moving up to that level in consulting is then you wind up dressing in pearls and suits and going out and meeting people and doing very little geology. I wound up on national work groups for various different types of environmental cleanup, working with a lot of national clients. And I would say at least 60 to 70% of my work was not geology. So I made a change about halfway through my career and went from private consulting and the 65-hour weeks that entailed, and joined the Cal EPA Department of Toxic Substances Control, specifically a unit that they called the Military Facilities Unit. California had gone through what was called BRAC, several rounds of BRAC, which was base realignment and closing, and they had hundreds of thousands of acres of military properties with all kinds of problems. And I wound up at Fort Ord, evaluating geophysics for cleaning up bombs. And I can tell you that was a long way away from what I initially thought I'd be doing as a geologist, which was hard rock mining. Again, I became the fixer, and I got moved around to a couple other projects that had some long-standing problems. And eventually I moved over to what was an open base, the China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station, and worked there for about 8 years, and started again getting tasked with joining national work groups for cleanup of unexploded ordnance or perchlorate or whatever the emergent contaminant of the day was. And that wasn't all bad, because I got to travel to neat places like going over to Florida for conferences and getting a chance to take a little bit of time to smell the roses or kayak on the mangroves. And one thing that you can say about military facilities and environmental cleanup is they have a lot of money. So projects usually progressed well, and there was usually a lot to do. And you'd be surprised at the types of things that you find at your local military base. China Lake in California, the base itself is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. And within the base, they have a national archaeological site called the Coso Petroglyphs that encompasses at least 200,000 acres that they know of. Petroglyph Canyon, they hired Fresno State surveying department to photograph and map all the different petroglyphs, and they ran out of money at 25,000. So it's a really interesting place, and you get to do a lot more than just environmental cleanup. Eventually, my project management skills and my geology skills were needed at another big site with a perchlorate problem, the Stringfellow Acid Pit site down in Southern California, which is a big national priorities list cleanup site that the taxpayers of the state of California are on the hook for the next 400 years. I got to do fun things like stay up all night pulling well casing out of the ground. Eventually, I got to the point in my life where I decided that I needed a promotion, and I had the time to go looking for it. And I made a lateral move to the State Water Resources Control Board Enforcement Unit. And there I had the fun job of actually investigating fraud, waste, and abuse against environmental cleanup grant programs. And what that involved was reading reports and documents and looking for people faking data. And it's surprising how much of that goes on. Maybe I was just naive, but we were able to recover millions and millions of dollars worth of funds that could be then funneled back into their intended purpose of cleaning up underground storage tank contamination. The main reason I moved over there was for more promotional opportunities, but the state being what it is, the promotional opportunities that were available at the State Water Board weren't kicking in until July 1st, which is the state's fiscal year. And the licensing board hired me before July 1st. So that's exactly how I wound up at the licensing board. I was just looking for a promotional opportunity, and the timing was right. And that's, I get to do a lot of different fun things there. I remember the first couple of weeks I was there, I was like, oh yeah, volcanoes. I know about volcanoes, you know, because there's a lot of California geology that I didn't necessarily get to work in when I was in consulting or when I was working at military bases. So my top lessons learned for your career. It's a small, small world. Connections are important, and don't burn your bridges. And since this is UC Davis, this is a picture of Benny Troxel, who used to be a famous geologist. He did a lot of mapping. You'll probably see his name on a lot of maps that you use. I met Benny when I was in college. My structural geology professor got his PhD at UC Davis, and Benny was his thesis advisor. I met Benny outside of Baker by the side of the highway when we were getting ready to go out and do a field project. Fast forward to 2015, and I needed to get some history on licensing for a regulation I was developing, and Benny happened to be just a few miles away up in Woodlands. So you never know when you're going to need advice from somebody. Technical skills are essential, and they're generally assumed that you have them. But people skills are critical. You can be the best technical person in the world, but if you can't talk to people, if you can't work with people, you're not going to go very far. Play to your strengths and improve upon your weaknesses. Believe it or not, I hate public speaking. I don't hate it so much now, but for the longest time, I really disliked public speaking. And you know, it was a significant weakness that was hindering my career, and I got over it. Flexibility will always reward you. If you are asked to try something new, the answer is yes. So just like I was able to get the best job of my life mapping landslides along Highway 50, it was simply because I said yes to trying something new with a friend. Life is not fair. Humans are fallible. Things go wrong. Deal with it. You've got to know that up front. This is the real world. Things are going to hit the fan, and you've got to be able to deal with that gracefully. The ability to communicate well will take you places beyond belief. But the poor communication skills will definitely hurt your career. When I was a manager, I used to tell my staff when I ripped apart their technical reports because they couldn't write, if our client can't understand what you did for them, they're not going to pay us. It's that simple. And communication skills will do even more than get you paid. In a lot of cases, they will keep you from getting sued. So if your client is mad at you, don't ignore them. You know, most of the time you can resolve things just by being upfront and honest and communicating what's really going on. And then my favorite phrase in these presentations is that luck favors the prepared. Now, I was reading a music magazine and I ran across a quote, and I can't remember the guy's name, but this next sentence is not mine. Success happens when preparation and opportunity collide. I thought that was a really great way of saying luck favors the prepared. And later on in the presentation, you'll get an idea of what I mean. But definitely, whatever you can do to stay ready, you should do it. So keep your eye on the prize. This is what everybody thinks their career path is going to be, and this is what it really looks like. So when you're looking for your first job, the best thing you can do is get experience. And any job experience is good experience. I always use the McDonald's example. If you have a job at McDonald's and you can articulate to a potential employer what that job taught you, that is great work experience. If you can tell a potential employer that you learned to work for a supervisor that you didn't like, that you learned to interact with the public, that you learned to work with people different than you, to show up on time, those are great soft skills to highlight in an interview. If you don't have the opportunity to participate in an internship or do something like GeoCourse, which is up on the screen, think about your college level work. Your professors are smart. They are equipping you for the quote unquote real world, the applied world. And think about your independent studies or your senior thesis. Um, I always use the example of a proposal. When I was a consultant, I would write a proposal. That's a lot like an independent study agreement. It outlines what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, and what's it going to cost. So once your proposal or your independent study is started, then you go out and you collect your data, you write a report, and in the case of a consultant, you come back and you get paid. In the case of a student, you get your grade. But if you can start thinking about your college experience in those terms, you'll be able to show a potential employer that college has equipped you with the skills to that a potential employer might be interested in. Now, starting your job search, the first bullet is a little bit out of date because most people can get digital transcripts these days. However, the best advice that I ever got from my dad was to order 10 copies of my transcript when I was doing my job search. And I can tell you, I used the 10th copy for this job. The reason you want to do that, along with getting your basic resume done, is that if you find out about a job on Thursday night and the deadline is Friday, all you have to do is reach over into your file cabinet, throw everything in an envelope, and put it in FedEx overnight. Luck favors the prepared. So you also might want to think about, are you willing to move? If you're thinking that you want to stay in Sacramento, the number of jobs available to you are going to be a lot smaller than if you open it up to all of California or all of the Western United States. It's not that one is better than the other, it's what's right for you. You can find a job in your local area. It might just take a little bit longer. So those are things to think about. Whenever you have time, you definitely should tailor your resume or application to the job and consider writing a qualification statement. If you don't know what it is, Google it. I will tell you that the first time I did it, it was a true pain in the neck. It took me 4 hours. But basically, a qualification statement is a written answer to the question of, why are you the best person for this job? Now, some jobs require it as from an applicant, but even if they don't, it's good for you to do that before you apply for the job, because it will organize your thoughts. And then when you get to the interview, I tell you, a lot of times that first interview question is, tell us why you're the right person for the job. And if you've already gone through and written up that essay for yourself, you'll be able to regurgitate that in an interview right away. Beware of social media. I know I shouldn't have to say that anymore. Most of you are probably much more savvy about it than most of people of my generation. But I can tell you, when I worked for the enforcement at the water board, the first thing we did when we got a case was get on social media. You'd be surprised how many people don't have their privacy settings set to private. And if I can see it on social media because it's a public post, that's perfectly legal. We caught all kinds of people defrauding the government because they were billing for money when they were on vacation in the Bahamas or whatever. But yeah, make sure that your social media settings are set to private and get a real email address. I know a lot of people like the cutesy email addresses, and that's great, but get a boring jane.doe@hotmail email address for your job search. You can forward it to your cutesy email. But the thing you've got to remember is that the people on the other side of the process are humans. And I can tell you that every time we've gotten a really funny email address, people run around the office sharing it with people. And that's not the impression you want to make. You want me running around the office sharing your resume with people because you're a really interesting and qualified candidate, not because you have a cutesy email address. Now, private sector careers are pretty standard. You know, search engines, career centers, Monster, Indeed, company websites. But I can tell you that almost every single job I've ever gotten in the private sector was the result of networking, getting out there and talking to people, going to the professional societies like AIPG or AEG or CalGeo or GRAC. Um, Hiring people is expensive. And if, as a hiring manager, I can just poach somebody from the competition at a local professional society, or I meet people several times over the course of several months and I have a comfort level with them, that's a lot easier for me. So here's just a screenshot of a bunch of different professional society web pages, and you'll notice that a lot of them have job boards, and many of them also have resume review services that you should definitely take advantage of. And I'm probably going to piss off all the geologists in my life, but if you can only go to one professional society, go to one of the multidisciplinary ones. If you have to choose, if you're an engineering geologist, that's the field you're going into, and you have to choose between AEG and CalGeo, go for CalGeo. And the reason I say that is that at CalGeo, you're going to meet geologists, you're going to meet engineers, you're going to meet whoever else is working in those companies. And the hiring manager may not be a geologist. So if you go to AEG, you're only going to meet the geologists because all of those other people out there that work in that industry don't go to AEG. They go to CalGeo. So the world is a multidisciplinary place. I would say that if you can go to more than one, pick one geology one and one multidisciplinary one. Now, state jobs are somewhat different than the private sector. The state has to advertise its jobs because we have to treat everybody the same. There's a website and a very specific process. And a lot of people think it's rather scary. In reality, it's not. It's almost like a checklist. The thing with the state to remember about jobs is that the state has like buckets. If you're in working in environmental and the job's advertised for a geologist, then only geologists can apply for that job. If it's a job like a project management job that can be done by an environmental scientist or an engineer or a geologist, only the people in that classification can apply for that job. So if it's classed for an engineer, even though a geologist might be qualified for it, they can't interview for it. It's silos. There's not a lot of cross-disciplinary stuff. The other thing to remember about state jobs is that the interviews are very structured. They have a series of questions. Every applicant is asked the same questions in the same order. They know the answer that they want. So if you're in this interview and nobody's writing anything down, you haven't hit on what they're looking for. Keep talking. and ask questions. My first state interview, I was looking at a blank wall, and once I figured out what they wanted, it took 15 minutes for them to stop writing. And keep in mind that for state and local government jobs in California, the licensing laws do apply. Here is a copy of the website. It's very intuitive. It's a lot better than it used to be. And I'll throw this out there because I've only been called on it once, but this website is actually so easy to use that even though I tell everybody I can that if you need help with the state website, call me and I'll walk you through it. I've only had one person actually ever take advantage of that. And that's because it really is that easy. So with the state, you basically have to start at the exam assessment stage. And that sounds scary, but it's not. It's basically an online resume where they walk you through a series of questions and you get a score. And then you can apply for jobs. And the hiring manager will say, I'm only going to interview people who have a score of, 70 and above, or whatever it is that they choose. The reason the state does it this way is that they hire hundreds of thousands of people, and they need to make sure that the English major isn't applying for a geology job. So here's a screenshot from probably back in, oh gosh, it must have been February, showing what these different job postings look like. And it'll tell you, what the salary range is. And when you click on view job posting, it'll get you a lot of details. The nice thing about that exam assessment thing, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right here, is you can start that part of the process in your senior year of college. If you don't like the score that you get, those scores only last for 12 months, so you can always redo that. Federal jobs are somewhat similar, but they tend to be more multidisciplinary. The job announcement will be an engineer or an environmental scientist or a geologist. They can do things like that in the federal system, but they can't do that in the state system. Use different search terms. Geologists, believe it or not, geologists are scientists, so use scientists, use environmental. And if you run across a term you don't know, look it up. In every case, follow the directions. The thing to understand about federal jobs, which is somewhat different than state jobs, is that with the state jobs, the hiring manager, the technical person, will be screening the applicants and then telling the HR folks who they want to interview. In the federal system, the applications are screened by those non-technical HR personnel. With a federal job, they're going to ask you to rank yourself on certain knowledge, skills, and abilities. Now, I'm not telling you to lie, but I am telling you to give yourself the benefit of a doubt. So if they ask you, rank yourself on how you brush your teeth, A, B, C, D, E, or F. Well, and you say, well, I'm kind of a B plus A minus. So you want to be good and honest and you give yourself a B plus. Well, the hiring manager said they only want to take people A and above. So if you had put down A minus instead of B plus, you would have gotten an interview. But because you put down B plus, you didn't get an interview. So keep that in mind. And again, I'm not telling you to lie, but if you're on the fence, give yourself the benefit of a doubt. The interviews are likely to be at least 2 people, and they'll probably be by telephone. And federal employees are exempt from state licensing. Again, here's the website. It's very intuitive. But again, if you have problems with it, give me a call and I'll walk you through it. Here's a sample of some listings for geologists. You'll see that they're at the bottom of the screen, interdisciplinary. They have some for recent graduates, and then they have various different classifications. So have fun and explore. Interview tips, definitely dress for the job you want, but don't think you have to spend a lot of money on a suit. Be early, or at least on time. And remember, you're being watched from the minute you get out of your car. It sounds really creepy, but it's true. When I interviewed for this job, they talked to every single person from the security guard in the lobby to the receptionist to anybody I was introduced to. every single person, because hiring somebody costs a lot of money. And they want to make sure that you are going to be a good hire, that you're going to get along with people. When I worked in consulting, I was hiring for a position, and in the middle of interviews, I got a call from one of my most important clients. And so I called down to my receptionist, Denise, and I said, Denise, I need you to tell so-and-so that I'm going to be about 15 minutes late for their interview. So that person came in and interviewed, and I was really considering offering him the job until I talked to Denise, because this person decided that they were better than everybody else and basically chewed out my receptionist for making them wait. Now, if you can't be nice to my receptionist, why in the world would I think you could be nice to my clients? So think about that. And in your interview, remember that they called you there because they were interested in you. So take a deep breath and relax a little bit. They want to meet you. That's why you're there. Prepare for tough questions. Simply do a Google search online. The ones I really hate are things like, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? Or, things like that. Keep in mind that every single question they ask you, they are looking for information. So the correct response to something like, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? They're looking for your career plans. Do you want to learn? Do you want to go technical track? Do you want to go management track? Are you interested in moving up? So kind of put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're looking for. Review a lot of the free webinars that are on AGI or GSA. If you're going in for a hydrogeology interview, review a bunch of videos before you go in, and be ready for a writing test or problem to solve. Definitely research the company, the agency, or the job. I have a friend who's a mechanic at California Highway Patrol, and the first time he interviewed with them, he didn't talk to me. And he went in, and the first question they asked him is, what is the mission of the California Highway Patrol? It's all over their website. He didn't know. He's going in for an interview with the California Highway Patrol, and he hadn't even bothered to look at their website. Second time, he was prepared. The other thing is, definitely send an email thank you, because at least in my experience, every time I've been hiring either in consulting or for the state, we always look at the top 3 candidates, and any one of those people could get the job. The person that is actually given the first offer is the one that we think is going to be the best cultural fit for our organization. So even if you don't get the job, keep that in mind. You probably did a lot better than you think you did. So here's an example. When I worked for DTSC, we were interviewing for another geologist, and this person was going to have to work with a longtime employee who was rather curmudgeonly. And he was just kind of difficult to work with. Great person, great at his job, but we eventually picked the person out of those 3 that we thought wasn't going to be scared of this person, that would, see through some of that bluster and get along with them and, not go running for the hills. So with that, that's really, the end of the career part of the presentation. So before we move on to stuff like the GIT, I just want to take a break and see if anybody has any questions about going out and looking for your first job, or what I did to find my first job.
I have one question. Do you have anything you would change or any special hints for a Zoom interview?
I'm sorry, could you speak a little louder?
Oh yeah. Do you have anything that you would change or anything you would include for an interview that's not on the phone, it's over Zoom?
No, not really, because the process is the same. The employer is still looking for that same information. you know, even with a phone interview where you're not on Zoom, I would recommend, you know, getting dressed up and prepared like you were going in person. Um, you know, Zoom, you've just got the other distractions in there. You know, make sure the dogs are fed and locked up in the bathroom where they can't be barking in the middle of the interview, that kind of thing. And make sure that, you know, whoever else in the household is off the internet so that they don't crash your Zoom call while you're in the middle of it. But other than that, you know, the common sense things like, you know, don't just wear a shirt and tie and then be sitting in your underwear kind of thing like they always show on the commercials, because something always goes wrong.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to do a speed dating version of the GIT certificate presentation. And again, I just want you to know that Katrina does have all the slides, and we do a version of this presentation monthly on the board's website. So the thing that I want to always start out with is terminology. You're going to hear a lot of different terms related to licensing and certification in your career. And it's always important to understand what these different terms mean. So registration is simply the creation of a list. And in California, geologists used to be called registered geologists because back in the day before computers, um, the board used to publish a paper registry or a paper list of all the licensed geologists in the state. Eventually, they modernized that terminology to professional geologist, but you'll still see a lot of other states using that term registered geologist or registration, when what they really mean is licensure. And licensing is something that anybody with a driver's license kind of instinctively understands. It's the government's permission for you to do something. Now, certification, you'll hear that with the AIPG Certified Professional Geologist, is simply the comparison of something to an established standard. And licensure encompasses both registration and certification. Basically, the government has a set of laws and you must meet certain criteria, which is that certification process, in order to become licensed and get a number, which is that registration part. But it's really important that you understand the difference between a professional society certification and a government issued license. And really, the whole purpose of being licensed is to protect the public, to establish those minimum standards for competency. You know, over 50 years ago, the state of California decided that geologists, the work geologists do, are critical enough. For example, making sure people know where the active faults are so you don't build a hospital across the top of one of them. And that the government had an interest in making sure that people who do this type of work at least have a minimum level of competency. Now, keep in mind that you can have a long and great career as a geologist without becoming licensed. However, for most geologists, for most applied geologists, if they're working in a state that has licensure, it's required by law. And keep in mind that even if you aren't required to be licensed, let's say you get a federal job and you're working for USGS or you're working for Yosemite, a lot of those people choose to become licensed because it increases their career opportunities and flexibility. I was talking to a person today who was looking to apply for a job with the state of California, but the job that he wants to apply for requires a license. Well, he isn't licensed, and it's going to take him a good 6 months to go through the process and get licensed. And he's going to lose out on that job opportunity because even though he currently works for a federal contractor for the federal government and he doesn't have to be licensed, he wants the ability to move around. So additionally, there's usually financial incentives. I can tell you that the minute I got my license, I walked into my boss's office and I got a 25% raise right there on the spot, no questions asked. Because being licensed means that you have a certain level of professional responsibility. Now, this slide's pretty busy, but it basically summarizes the laws with regards to geology licensing and the qualifications in California. What I really want to emphasize on this slide is that there's three things you need: education, experience, and exams. The board evaluates your education and experience, and then if you meet those criteria, allows you to take the exam. The biggest take-home message from this slide is that the way the geology law is written and the regulations are written in California, these must be done in sequence. So if, for example, you have a geology education, but you're missing some specific educational requirement required in the regulations, your work experience won't count until you get it. And that's something really, really, really important to understand. So in general, to get a geology license in California, you have to have a qualifying degree or 30 semester hours, and that's an or 30 semester hours of qualifying geologic coursework. So that means you don't even have to have a degree. You just have to have the education. Now, for those of you who might need a high school refresher on high school civics, the legislature and the governor pass what's called legislative laws. And that's what most of us think of as laws. And when they do, the implementation of that law is assigned to some agency, department, board, whatever. And that entity promulgates what is called rules and regulations to implement that law. So if you learn nothing else, whenever you're dealing with a government agency, you need to look two places. You need to look both at the law and the implementing regulations, because both of them are legally enforceable. So for various reasons, the board was forced to update the regulations regarding geology licensure recently, and define specifically what the law meant by qualifying degree and what the law meant by 30 semester hours. So I'm going to move ahead to the next slide because it kind of explains some of the concepts that are important to understand here. Every reputable university in California has something that's called regional accreditation. So UC Davis, CSU Sacramento, they are accredited by a regional accrediting agency authorized by the US Department of Education. And in our area, that regional entity is the Western Association. In addition to that school-wide institutional accreditation, individual degree programs can participate voluntarily in degree or program level accreditation. So on this slide from Sac State, this goes on for 4 or 5 pages. But for example, if you get a graphic design degree from CSU Sacramento, that program has an additional voluntary accreditation through the National Association of Schools of Art and Design. So because the board can't define or accredit universities, the board selected an outside voluntary accrediting agency that does offer that voluntary program level accreditation for geoscience programs, and that's the ABET program. So that voluntary program level accreditation is not very common for geoscience programs. I believe San Diego State University is looking at going through that process, but schools like UC Davis very often don't participate, and that's fine. It's a totally voluntary thing, which is why the law has two options. So if you don't have an ABET accredited geoscience degree, you're automatically shunted into the 30 semester hours part of the law. So in order to make sure that every applicant is treated fairly and that we're comparing apples to apples, the board established a list of required classes that has to be part of that 30 semester hours. Now, I know UC Davis probably does quarter units, And anytime you're talking about a credit union, think of it as a measure of educational time. So just like you can convert between centimeters and inches, you can convert back and forth between semester hours and quarter hours and term hours and European credit transfer system hours. It's a measurable quantity that's defined. So on this slide, when you're looking at the list of courses and you see that parentheses for S6Q, for example, next to earth materials, what that means is in the regulation, the courses defined as earth materials, you must have either 4 semester hours or the equivalent 6 quarter hours of that course as part of your 30 semester hours. We did the conversion for you. Basically, a quarter hour is 2/3 of a semester hour. So on this slide, you're required to have 4 core classes and 2 applied upper division electives from the list. And each of these classes has a very specific set of knowledge, skills, and abilities that are defined in the regulation, and a very specific set of credit hours. So for example, if you have structural earth materials, and you only took 3 units of mineralogy and you didn't take any petrology or anything else, you don't have 4 semester hours. So keep in mind, these are bright line requirements that are established, and I have 0 discretion. So here's an example of one of the paragraph long descriptions for upper division field geology. And this is why it's really important that if you're applying for a license or for a geologist in training certificate, that you understand that you have to read this. And just to go through this, because this is one we get a lot of questions on, it doesn't have to be summer field, but it does have to be upper division field geology coursework. It's not introductory. In other words, it's not the course that teaches you how to use a Brenton compass or to use a GPS unit. And it can't be the field laboratory for your other classes. So if you have a 1-unit field laboratory as part of your 4-unit structure class, you can't use that 1-unit field laboratory because that's a structure class. It's not a field class. There are some various things in the regulations that allow for some alternative types of academic instruction, including things like independent studies or different types of research projects. The key to understanding all of this is to remember that everything has to be documentable. So if you're doing a research project or an independent thesis, independent study, and you want to use that, let's say you needed something for said strat, or you needed something for one of the applied requirements, then you're going to have to be able to document it. There are 3 licensing exams required for a geology license in California: the 2 National Association of State Boards of Geology exams and the California specific exam. Now, the 2 national exams are written by ASBOG, and it's good to understand that ASBOG is just basically the states. It's the venue where all the state licensing boards get together. ASBOG is an exam vendor, or you could also think of them as a professional society. They have no ability to overrule state requirements. And in California, because we have a unique set of geologic conditions and we have unique laws and regulations, you also have to pass an exam based on the practice of geology in California. Now, the GIT is an optional step, totally optional, on the pathway to a geology license. And because the Fundamentals of Geology exam, which is one of those 2 national exams that are required to get licensed, is intended to test baccalaureate level knowledge, the board allows you to take that exam once you hit that 30 semester hour threshold. So if you're a junior or senior in college and you meet all the requirements for education here, under the green part of this, where you have your 4 core classes, your 2 upper division electives, which total about 15 of those 30 semester hours, and then you have the additional 15 semester hours, you can apply to the board and take this Fundamentals of Geology exam. If you pass it, you're awarded a certificate that allows you to use a legally protected title of Geologist in Training, which is not a license to practice the geology, but it can be very, very useful to you because it shows a potential employer that you've passed the first of the 3 required licensing exams and that they can be assured beyond your degree that you are technically competent, that you understand the laws and regulations related to licensing, and that you know what it takes to advance in your profession. Additionally, ASBOG statistics show that the longer you've been out of school, because that Fundamentals of Geology exam is designed to test baccalaureate level knowledge, the harder it is to pass, which makes sense if you think about it, because as you go into your career, you tend to become a little bit more specialized. Maybe you're working doing hydrogeology all day long and you forget some of your mineralogy. But there's some very consistent statistics that show it doesn't really matter whether it's a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. The pass rates decline the longer you've been out of school. Additionally, when preparing for the FG test, if you think about it, because it's designed to test what you learned in school, you just spent thousands upon thousands of dollars and several years of your life in the world's most expensive study course. Preparing for the test is pretty straightforward. The tests are based on occupational surveys of the profession, and there's an examination blueprint for the Fundamentals of Geology exam, the Practice of Geology exam, and for the California Specific exam. So if you look at the slide, it'll tell you that 11% of the questions are going to be on engineering geology, and 9% of the questions are going to be on economic and resources geology. The suggestions for preparing for the exam, I actually took these off of a GSA webinar I did, and the person who gave them on the webinar was a GIT who had passed within the last 12 months. He recommended visiting the ASBOG website. There are only certain calculators allowed in the exam, so he suggested that you buy one of those calculators while you're studying and practice with it, so you're not having to deal with learning a new calculator in the middle of the exam. Making some flashcards and viewing a lot of the recorded technical webinars. If you do feel that you need to buy some of the study materials that are out there, there's 2 or 3 companies out there that offer study materials and study courses. Don't spend more than you need to. There's a lot of people who are out there who have taken these exams, and maybe somebody who was 2 or 3 years ahead of you in school bought the flashcards. Maybe you can just borrow them and not have to spend the money. So with that, that's the 10-minute version of the GIT talk. So if anybody has any questions about becoming licensed or the Geologist in Training exam, please let me know. And I'm going to stop sharing if I can figure out how to do that. Stop share. There we go.
All right, I had a quick question.
Sure.
So at our last meeting, we had a student from UCSB who is graduating this year talk about a little bit what you said about, you had one slide that mentioned often you can qualify before graduation to apply for the GIT. And she was curious about this because a lot of us graduating seniors at this point in time, and the application date is coming up in a week or so. Yeah. We have not maybe finished all of them, but we will by the test date. All of those requirements.
Yeah. So what I recommend, we recognize that the application deadline and the school schedule doesn't often jibe one-on-one. Fortunately, the original geology board included something in the regulations that says you have until 70 days before the exam to provide documentation in support of your application. So if you were going to apply by the May 3rd deadline, which is next week, and you weren't going to have your final classes on your transcript, send in the application anyway and include the transcripts that you have, because what'll happen is it'll show on the transcript course in progress. So then the admin staff will give me the file for technical review, and I'll see course in progress, and I'll just email you or call you up and say, hey, shoot me a new copy of your transcripts. And these days with the digital transcripts, the school can email them directly to me, and it'll show your grades posted, and then you're done.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple.
Perfect. And you said that's 70 days before the test date.
Yeah, and I have it in my email exactly when that is. Basically, we just use one of the online date calculators, and that's 70 calendar days, not 70 business days. Okay. So every exam cycle, the staff print out a list of dates for me that includes that. It's always better whenever you can to get your stuff in earlier rather than later, because if everybody waits till the last minute, then it means that, you know, it's a lot harder to get everybody through, because we do have some hard deadlines as far as ordering the exams from ASBOG, which are still paper and pencil at this point. Although within the next year, maybe 2 years, they're going to be transitioning to computer-based testing, similar to what the board does. The California specific exam is a computer-based test, not you know, Scantron, fill in the bubble. So so yeah, but there are some hard deadlines as far as ordering exams. Okay, perfect. I think I will be applying then. Okay. For submitting my application. And then, you know, I am the only geologist at the board. So I always joke and tell people, you don't even have to remember my name. Just call the board's office and ask to talk to the geologist. I answer my own phone. I answer my own emails. My contact information is on the contact us part of the website. It's about as easy as possible to get a hold of me. Even during COVID, you know, we've been able to maintain communication with people quite a bit. The other thing to look at on our website, if you haven't had a chance to go through it, is there is a frequently asked questions document on the geology application page. And it's basically every question I've gotten over the last 5 years. So a lot of the bureaucracy stuff, we get the same question over and over, and we put that out there to hopefully allow people to, you know, they're filling the thing out 11 o'clock at night, they can't get a hold of anybody to ask a question, and that's what that's for. So that's on there, and our website is very text intensive because we have to comply with certain ADA requirements that allow for readers, you know, the auto computer readers kind of thing for people with low vision. And so if you can't find something, just shoot me an email and I'll send you a direct link, because sometimes it can get kind of cumbersome digging through all that text. There's not a lot of graphics to click on our website, unfortunately, but the main reason is because we try and be ADA compliant. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, Laurie, I've got a question. Actually, we don't have anybody from India present right now, but they have asked us, how do I get qualified in California and some of the other states? Their college university system is different than ours. So
we get a lot of international applicants. I can tell you that it's really pretty easy. They follow the same process. For international education, we do require transcripts. We don't do the degree evaluations. We do our own. I can tell you that every single international transcript I've looked at, I've been able to find an equivalency for converting their units to semester hours. The European credit transfer system is wonderful. So for example, if I've got an applicant whose education was University of Tehran, I can convert the Tehran units to European credit transfer system units, because I can always find that equivalency and then convert that to semester hours. I can tell you that most international applicants are well qualified as far as education. I've never turned down an international applicant due to education, mostly because they are not, they view college a little bit differently than we do in the States. In the United States, the number of units in the major for geology has dropped by 15 to 20 semester units since the late 1990s. So I believe the average is about 45 semester hours. For an international baccalaureate degree, it's more like 90 semester hours. Because they don't have to take, 70, 80 units of general ed. They assume that you learned to, you learned your history in high school. You learned everything, that makes you a well-rounded person in high school. That's the way their system is set up. So in many cases, an international candidate with a baccalaureate degree has the equivalent of a master's degree from the United States. At least that's been my experience.
Have you processed anyone from India specifically?
India, Ethiopia, Myanmar, Ireland, the Philippines, Canada. I should have a map in my office with flags. But yeah, we have done almost every country that you can name. I don't think I've got anything from Liechtenstein or Monaco, but definitely many of the countries in the world have applicants that have submitted California license applications.
Okay, thanks. Lupita, Zach, you guys have any questions?
It's Thursday. Everybody's burned out and sleepy.
Yeah, can't say I blame them.
I understand. And Zoom fatigue is real. We've actually had a lot of groups shorten their Zoom events because people are just getting burned out on Zoom. Is
John,
that John? And hi, John. I haven't seen you in ages. I'm surprised that you tuned in to hear me talk. You've listened to me talk so much over the years.
I learn something every time, Lauria. Someday I'm going to get licensed.
I can tell you, I miss our lunches.
Oh, those were good.
Now I just get to have coffee with the woman sitting next to you.
Yes.
So,
Laurie, one thing I'll throw out, I know some geologists in other states that don't have licensing that have very intentionally gotten a California license because they want to show that level of professionalism.
Yes, a lot of times people in non-licensed states will get a license in a state that, gosh, a while back it used to be California because the California exam was kind of the gold standard. Now it's just common to get it in the next nearest state.
Sure. Oh, these are old people, so.
Not as experienced. Experienced is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, I got my license before there was an ASBOG.
So did I, actually.
Back in the last century.
Yeah.
Since I can't transfer mine to another state easily.
Oh, I know. I do get a certain number of people of my generation who take the ASBOG exams, even though they're already licensed, just to make getting a license in other jurisdictions easier.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
I
so.
think I'd pass.
You'd pass, no problem. Unfortunately, since I've written the exams, I can't take the exam. So
Yes.
I'm stuck in California, which is fine with me.
I was going to say thank you very much. It's a terrific talk. And even though we have a small but elite group of people on this call, it's quite likely that we may have a large number of AIPG members as well as other people from the public that will watch your presentation. So I think that even though it's a small group here, I think you're going to get a lot of people watching it later on. So thank you very much. It was a terrific talk.
All right. Well, again, everybody knows where to find me. I'm the only geologist at the licensing board. So anybody has questions about anything, give me a call.
Laura, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you,
Have a
Laurie.
good evening,
Lots of
folks.
wisdom.
Great talk, Laurie. Great talk.
All right. Bye-bye.
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 Yes, thank you.
Okay, Katrina, are we finished?
I think we are good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll be talking to you guys in probably in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Yeah.